1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la. Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la.
Good morning, guys.
Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la. Oh, it's the Hake Report, the Hake Report, la la la.
So, good morning, guys. It is 9 a.m. Pacific time, Friday, September 13th, 2019. And I am James Hake, live in the hour 4 of the Jesse Lee Peterson streams on YouTube, Periscope, D Live, and Mixer, and live audio on JLPtalk.com. And I have a special surprise for you guys. Well, I don't know. I kind of announced it. Podcast afterward, by the way, by going to thehakereport.com/podcast. But if you have any questions or comments for my guest, you may call in, hopefully, 888-775-3773. Hopefully he's open to taking your calls. I have Ben Burgis with a Marxist logical argument. Ben Burgis is a philosophy professor, author of the recent book, Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, available on Amazon, Google, elsewhere. He does a weekly guest segment on the Michael Brooks show called The Debunk with Ben Burgis. Find the playlist on YouTube. Follow him on Twitter at Ben Burgis, B-U-R-G-I-S. Ben, B-E-N is his first name. He was on Jesse Lee Peterson's show Wednesday, June 26, 2019, Hour 2. Check it out. It's fun. He has a PhD in philosophy from the University of Miami. He is a science fiction writer, or was. He has taught at Rutgers University in New Jersey, as well as Georgia State University Perimeter College. He's written recent columns in Jacobin Magazine, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and Arc Digital Magazine on the liberal Medium platform. So, Ben Burgis, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, James.
Cool. So, what do you think of President Donald Trump before we get into the rest of this stuff?
As I would imagine that you know, and as I'd imagine anybody would guess from that intro, I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan. Are you going to vote for him?
No, I'm pretty sure that my hand would start shaking and falling off if it went anywhere near the Trump lever.
That's fun. That's funny. Then I'm done with you. But anyways.
All right, fair enough. Good interview. Thanks.
Yeah. Did you like anybody at the Dem debates last night? Did you watch it?
I did watch it. And as always, of course, I like Bernie Sanders. I think that he has important moral clarity about giving everybody health care, securing those kinds of basic economic human rights, and, opposing more wars and intervention abroad. I think that he's just consistent. He's not going to do anything that surprises you. It's like if you go, if you go to see a Leonard Skinner show, right? You're going to hear Freebird. If you go see anything with Bernie Sanders in it, you're going to hear about Medicare for all and the millionaires and billionaires. It's not new, but I do like it every time I hear it.
He's kind of weak, in my opinion. Like, he kissed up to the Black Lives Matter girls that stormed his stage in 2015, 2016. I never got over that with him. And I think that weakness is why he bowed the knee to Hillary Clinton, to kind of betraying his fans. And
well,
so
I
just
don't.
So. Yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
No, you're good. Go for it.
Okay. Well, look, as far as, as endorsing Hillary at the end of the primary, I always thought seeing that as a betrayal was a little ridiculous, because he said from the very first moment that he entered the race that, of course, if he didn't win, he would endorse the nominee. That's how American elections work. You can either do like Ralph Nader and get 3% of the vote and throw the election to the candidate that you would least like, right? And yeah. I'm not saying anything, bad about Ralph Nader, who I think in many ways is a very admirable person, but that clearly didn't work out well. Or you can understand that American elections have two stages. There's one of them where you can where you can try to get the best nominee that you can. And then there's the other one where you have to make a comparative choice. You say, well, which one sounds worse, Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton?
I got you.
And I'm second to nobody in my loathing of Hillary Clinton. I think she was and is awful in many ways.
Trump is way better than Hillary.
But for me, that's as you would imagine, I think the opposite. For me, that's an easy choice. As bad as Hillary was,
so
Trump is much worse.
So you are a Marxist, correct?
Yeah.
And that is so creepy to me.
All right. Well, let's see if we can, get down
explain,
on the couch and
explain
you can tell me about your feelings about it, and we can explore the roots of those emotions.
All right. Well, explain briefly to me what a Marxist is in your mind.
Sure.
And how you became one.
So what it means to me, right? So Karl Marx is a philosopher and economist who wrote in the 19th century. And he has a theory of history that we can get into if you'd like, and how economic systems work. But as far as the practical upshot of it for politics in the United States, I'd make a distinction between two ways that you can be a socialist. So now we can talk about three ways if you want to talk about the old Soviet model, but now hardly anybody advocates that. That's as dead can be. So really, what's what it can mean is either that you're what Bernie is, which is a social democrat. So in other words, somebody who wants to maybe nationalize the health insurance industry, secure some basic human rights to healthcare and housing and things like that, but who basically wants to keep most of the existing capitalist economy the way it is. And Marxist socialists like me, of course, I think that what Bernie's talking about is a great first step. But I think that ultimately it's not good enough. I think ultimately you need to have democracy in the economy, which is really what Karl Marx was talking about, which is the opposite of like what they had in the Soviet Union. So in other words,
I got you.
You need to have, right now we've got democracy in politics, but in the workplace, for those 8 hours out of every 16 for most people that they're awake, they have a unelected boss who can dictate every detail of their behavior. And of course, having the economy in the hands of a smaller and smaller number of people as corporate America consolidates is very bad for the environment. It's very bad for a lot of things. And so I think that we need to, long term, I think we need to push for a more humane and democratic economic system.
Yeah, humane and Marxism don't go hand in hand, in my opinion. But I hear a lot of, communists and Marxists sound so nice.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So when you say that they don't go together, in your opinion, is that because you just equate Marxism with like what they had in the Soviet Union and those countries?
No, because I don't know much about what happened with the Soviet Union. I just know about the present day, like the people that are the people that are openly communists, like many in Antifa are openly communists, they claim so. And that is, Antifa is not particularly humane, but sometimes they have this false imitation of love for fellow human beings, such as, they want to combat so-called racism and stuff like that. And so that type of
that's interesting. We definitely have to go back to that later, but keep going.
Yeah, feeling sorry for victims is like the worst. It's basically enables the worst in human beings. And, a lot of these socialists, unions were socialists. And I know that the unions target the angry people to become, the disgruntled workers, say. And angry, disgruntled, victim-minded people tend to, as you've seen in even the white victim-minded people, like at El Paso, they tend to victimize other people. And so that's why Marxism, in my opinion, is like a victim mindset type of thing. And democracy is evil. Like democracy we don't want because that has no safeguards against, it's basically mob rule. And so I'm not for that. It's like Marxists want to destroy freedom in America and Christianity, white people, men, and rebuild it in their image. Like they were okay somewhat with Obamacare messing with our freedoms a little bit, but they do want to destroy Obamacare and rebuild it in their, total like single payer or whatever. So that's how I see it.
Okay. So there's a lot going on in that answer. I guess where I would start is near the beginning of what you said when you talked about unions and victimization. Because to me, organizing a union is exactly the opposite of just seeing yourself as a perpetual victim and sitting around feeling sorry for yourself. That's an attempt to use your collective power, the fact that as workers, the workplace doesn't run without you, to actually do something about it and better yourself, get a better deal. Unions are what got us the weekend. Unions are what got us,
the weekend is too much.
Okay.
It should have just been one day.
All right. Well,
one
that's
day.
Very consistent. That's a points for consistency. That you if you're against the weekend, it seems to me that that like especially if you look at like where I'm from in Michigan, you look at the factories there where people worked for several decades. My father worked in an auto plant for a little while. Like that's very repetitive, dangerous, loud. Pleasant work, and people had been, getting the sort of wages and benefits that you would get at McDonald's, for doing that until the UAW came along and could actually give people a decent middle class lifestyle. And I think that's tremendously positive. As far as what does seem to me like victimization, I've got to say, right, when I hear people on the right who have these what strike me, and I'm not saying this to be harsh. I'm saying this because I think this is true. But what strike me as elaborate victim fantasies about how white people are somehow being persecuted, or Christians are somehow being persecuted, or men are somehow being persecuted. We're talking about the groups. Like, look, I'm in 2 out of 3 categories here. I've got to say that this is if you are a white man in the United States, to borrow a metaphor from John Scalzi, you're playing the video game at the easiest settings level, right? And so if you can convince yourself that, that you're being victimized, you might be a white man who's been victimized in other ways. You might be a white man who doesn't have health care, who's lost his job. You might have lots of legitimate complaints, but none of that has anything to do with being white or being a man.
But people are very, leftists tend to be very dismissive and put all the responsibility on the whites, the men, the Christians, and no responsibility on the POCs and the non-Christians, anti-Christians, and the women.
Well, I mean, I think there are very few anti-Christians, but I want to think about this, because you just said 2 things that, like, within a couple of minutes that don't seem to me that they go together. Okay. So maybe you can unpack them a little bit, right? So on the one hand, you talked about how bad it is to see yourself as a victim, to really think a lot about victimhood. And on the other hand, you said that, that there are all these horrible, problems for whites, Christians, and men, and, you faulted the left for being too dismissive of their complaints. And that sounds to me like you're saying that white Christian men are victims. Is that wrong?
No, it's not wrong, because many of the whites and Christians and men are becoming victim-minded. You see it with MGTOW. You see it with the incels. You see it with some of the alt-right people. They have like a victim mindset. They blame Jews and everybody else for the problems, and they blame women. And so there is like a bad victim mentality, but you have to tell the truth about what's happening, and there is an attack on those people. Let me ask, do Marxists support freedom of speech?
Well, I certainly do. There certainly have been, like Marx and Engels themselves were opposed to press censorship. There's actually Rosa Luxemburg, who's an important Marxist from the early 20th century, has a very eloquent defense of free speech in her book about the Russian Revolution. And so what I would actually say about that, I support free speech. Look, there are people who I agree with about lots of things politically who I don't think take free speech concerns seriously enough. I'm certainly not going to deny that for a second.
All right.
But I also see a lot of inconsistency all around here.
Fair enough.
Because and part of the reason that I see that is that if you're like a leftist, or especially like some sort of socialist or Marxist, then it makes sense for you to say, hey, we have free speech concerns, about like what some big tech company is doing, right? About like what Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, is doing, because part of being a socialist is recognizing that in a capitalist society, the structures of power are often private. That it's not that. That really, that realistically the government has less power over our lives than these big companies do a lot of the time. Whereas normally a lot of right wingers will say, oh, no, freedom, like when you were talking about the ACA taking away some of our freedom or single payer taking away more of our
Right.
freedom, it sounds like you're saying, well, freedom is just kind of letting private companies do whatever they want. And, as long as you sign the dotted line, the end user license
Oh
agreement.
yeah, I hate lawyers because they
You
tend
have
to
no-
yeah they tend
no,
to
no,
be
okay, sure. So good. So
all right.
so it seems to me, that usually, like the right's idea about freedom is that freedom means letting consumers and producers do whatever they want to in a marketplace, and as long as nobody is like technically forcing anybody to do anything, then that should just be a free for all. But then I see a bunch of right wingers complaining about what YouTube or Twitter or Facebook
Right.
does
Yep.
in a way that suggests that they think that even though those are private companies, according to a right-wing conception of freedom, they should be able to do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, those guys tend to play with government protection, such as this whole publisher versus platform thing, where they pretend like they're not a publisher, so they don't censor anybody, but then they pretend not to be a publisher, right? And so
Right, I
they don't
get what you're saying,
censor
yeah.
anybody, but and then that protects them from lawsuits of stuff that's said on their platform, and then they just decide to censor people. I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question. I don't know what the right answer for internet censorship is.
Okay.
But let me move faster.
Yeah, go for it.
The fundamental right to own and carry effective, cutting-edge, modern guns and weapons. Do you support the Second Amendment?
Well, I think that it's interesting because if you look, okay, sorry. So I'm doing a bad professor thing here, which is that I'm automatically jumping to this sort of complexities and gray areas. But you're asking a practical political question. So I'm going to answer that first before we dig into the details. As far as a practical political question goes, what you mean by it? No, I don't. I think
Okay.
that I think that having more guns than people, which is what we've got right now, is leading to a situation where we actually have, in practice, a much less free society because, for example, even suburban high schools increasingly look like prisons because
You
have to have
you know what I
armed guards everywhere. People are moving from, heavily from, hard target to hard target all the time. And I don't know that that's a society that I would prefer to live in. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Let me skip where you may want to elaborate just to keep
Sure.
this moving fast.
Sure.
I got you.
Yeah, let's keep going. Let's
You know
keep
what
going.
I think about it with you're referring to the increasing immorality of all races and people, all communities, where there's, mass shooter could pop up anywhere. And, murders are coming up amongst all races. I noticed that it's just basically kind of freedom has to come with morality. Otherwise, if they aren't moral, then they're going to end up losing their freedoms one way
All right,
or another.
Can I make a real quick point about this before you move on?
Sure.
Sure. So I think that the problem with blaming it on cultural trends or people being more immoral is that if you look at the U.S. in comparison to Canada, to Europe, to Japan, we're talking about places where they have all the same cultural trends that we do. They have, they play all the same violent video games. They have, there's the same decline in religiosity, but somehow the United States has way more, and I'm not just talking about overall, because I understand there are more people here than in those other countries, but per capita, right? Per capita, we have way more mass shootings than those other places. So it seems to me that the difference has got to be the gun laws.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not for, whatever, in my opinion.
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the next topic you want to move on
Okay.
to?
Do you support the human right of discrimination? People have a human right to discriminate against one another. Do you support that?
So just to be clear, you're not just talking about like I can discriminate when it comes to who I want to hang out with or whatever, you know, who I want to.
I'm talking businesses. Yeah.
Businesses have a right to discriminate. So like in your view, if like a restaurant wants to put a whites only sign in their window, they should have a right to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I emphatically disagree with that. I think that segregation is a huge impediment to meaningful human freedom and flourishing. But
that's anti-freedom.
Okay, well, I disagree. So I think that well, I mean, you want to hear why I disagree?
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So the reason I disagree is that I think that freedom, right? You know, you can have, you know, this goes back to the same question as the thing about the tech companies, the internet censorship.
Yeah,
right?
those guys. So, yep.
You know, so do you see freedom primarily in terms of like marketplace freedom, primarily in terms of, you know, of property owning plutocrats being able to do whatever they want with their property, no matter how much that hurts anybody else? Or do you see freedom primarily in terms of people being able to live their lives in practice however they so choose? And I think if you have that second view, then, if like a black family in the 1950s, when what you're talking about was still legal, has to like, they're on a road trip and, they can't, and they're driving through Alabama somewhere and they have to drive for hours before they can find someplace that serves them dinner. They have, they're probably going to be a lot poorer because, there are a lot fewer places they can apply, to work, et cetera, that in practice, they have a lot less control over their lives than a black family in 2019 that still has to deal with a lot of crap, but doesn't have to deal with that. And I think that kind of meaningful freedom is actually served by giving everybody a right to health care, right to housing, et cetera, so that you have more bargaining power. You're not worried, if I piss off my boss, I'm going to lose my health insurance. And, and you have everything from like people are worried, if I go to a political protest and the picture's on, and somebody snaps a picture, my boss might see it, to if I get a tattoo.
Yeah, people are getting
my job at Starbucks. I think people in all of these ways, in my view, would be much more free if we had a much more social democratic outlook where what businesses can do is much more restricted.
That's lame, man.
People have their basic needs provided, so they're not totally dependent on their employers for all of these things all the time.
Let me ask, are you part Jewish?
Yeah.
Why are so many Jewish people like Marxist, atheist, things like that? Liberal, 70% Democrat, all that stuff.
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't think that the honest answer to your historical question, why is there more, why is like the rate of secularization of people being non-religious higher among American Jews than American Christians? That's probably a complicated historical and sociological question that I wouldn't claim to have any insight about. I think it's an interesting question, but I would push back just a little bit on that last part, that that like sort of equating the voting for Democrats part with the non-religious part, because look, I'm not religious and don't claim to be, but there are plenty of people who are deeply religious who agree with all of my political conclusions. That you have Jews like Rabbi Michael Lerner, the editor of Tikkun, or you have Christians like Dr. Cornel West, who
he's a Christian.
Dude, if you have a
I had no idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Well, I think that I would say that he would say the same thing about you, but I think he might not think he was very Christian to say the same thing about you.
So, Marxism is kind of like an atheist religion. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say so. No, I think that Marxism is a historical analysis.
Is it atheist?
Well, Marx is an atheist, but I think that you could agree with. I think you could agree with a lot of Marxist insights without being an atheist. some of the people, that I just mentioned, right?
Yeah,
Are
yeah. Okay.
very influenced by some Marxist ideas. So I think that you can have. So I don't think it's a religion. I think that it's a historical analysis of how economic systems have developed
But
so far and what might be possible for the future.
But it seems like your mission in life. It's your mission in life. Oh, he went blank.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that
Marxism.
I would say that obviously, politics isn't my entire life any more than I think it's your entire life.
Yeah.
But of course, insofar as I do care about helping other people and helping make the world better, then politics is a big part of that. And it has, and so any kind of analytic framework that can tell me something about how I can most effectively move in the world politically is going to be very helpful to me. But it's not like I'm praying to the big Marx statue, or in a temple somewhere.
Right.
I just think it's a helpful and convincing historical analysis.
I think that Marxism is kind of like a sister of, like Islam, that leftist fake Christianity that you referred to, the anti-Christian. There are some Jewish people that are actually practicing Jews as opposed to the atheist ones, like the Apostle Paul was kind of anti-Christian Jewish guy. Cults and other things, very controlling. Socialism, very controlling. They don't want to let businesses do what they want. I think, here's my theory, that the Jewish people are in like 100+ year spiritual phase. You know how different cultures and people go through phases. In your own life, you go through a phase, and then through generations, people go through phases where like they reject common sense and reality, such as Trump brings like common sense and reality type of a guy. He just big picture, not light on the details, right? But big picture type of a guy, a leader, very commonsensical, such that even like the so-called right-wingish Jewish people like rejected him at first, at least many of them. And so I think that they're like playing God, especially the left, but also the quote unquote right. I think that they're in that phase right now where like Christianity is the right way, like right continuum of Judaism. And since they reject that, they are going through this playing God phase of Marxism and all their leaning on their own understanding type of atheistic Marxism and stuff like that, and the fake religion too. That's how I see it.
Okay, all right.
That's my theory.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm gonna blow your mind here and say that I don't think so. But I will. I do want to just real quick pick up on two parts of what you just said. So I think that that first, even though I'm not religious, but but there are lots of people who I respect, who have, I guess my wife is probably one of those people you regard as fake Christians.
Oh man, she married you?
Yeah.
Nice.
And like the church that that she used to go to in New Jersey, I think did a lot of really admirable things, helping immigrants who are in trouble with ICE, stuff like that.
Gosh.
But they have well, and I think, and so I have to say, like on in the defense of the fake Christians, that that the way you're equating right-wing politics with Christianity as if Christianity is inherently on the right, does seem like an awkward fit with a lot of the things that Jesus actually says, like that they have that love, or like Apostle Paul, that love is more important than faith, or like that when Jesus says that it's harder for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, and I've heard all the tortured explanations about the needle is really a tunnel and all this stuff. They have that for a rich man to enter the gate into heaven, or the fact that the only explicitly political statement that Jesus makes anywhere in the Gospels is that it's important to pay your taxes. I think that given all of that, trying to say that that his teachings are a more natural fit with the right and the left is a little bit of a stretch. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that they have, as far as freedom goes,
Let me cut in briefly.
If you're defining freedom just in terms of what businesses can do, well, the thing is, James, the vast majority of people do not own businesses and realistically can't.
They
don't
should.
Have they don't have the starter capital.
No, you don't have to. It doesn't take capital.
Well,
Jesse Lee Peterson of Bond, the nonprofit, runs a entrepreneur academy, and people start businesses with no money, and it's just a step-by-step thing, just like anything else. You have to
get some money at some point, and even once you do,
because
the vast majority of businesses fail within the first 5 years.
Yeah, good.
So there are only so many lifeboats out of the working class, and most of them sink.
But the working class is a socialist term.
Well, no, the working class is a descriptive term. People who work for others for a living rather than owning the businesses that they work for. And
it's a socialist description.
Most people are going to be in it, right? Like you said, when I said most people don't own their own businesses, you said, well, they should. Well,
I was just kidding. I was messing around.
I think we both know that it's not possible for most people to own their own businesses. It's structurally impossible because if everybody tried to become a business owner, and no matter how hard they tried or no matter how good they were at it,
I got you, man.
You can't have an economy.
I understand.
Most people aren't in those working class jobs. For one thing,
hold on.
Because nobody would be picking the lettuce. Nobody would be taking grocery stores.
Hold on. So, all right, I got you, man. I got you. Hold on. Ben, hold on. I got you.
So I would much rather have a politics that expanded freedom for the 99% of people at the bottom of society, rather than defining freedom as freedom for business owners.
Yeah, what's going on, guys, is when we talk over each other, he can't hear me or I can hear him actually because he has a pretty good connection. But so that thing about love, like that's what I notice about the liberal so-called Christians. Is they follow the world's fake definition of love. They don't understand real love, tough love, and real compassion. They have like a fake compassion. But let me move faster. Okay. Because actually, let me get to it. You open for calls?
What's up?
You open to take calls?
Oh, yeah, let's take some calls.
Let me take some calls because they've been on hold a while. Tino, out of New Jersey, question for Ben Burgis. How are you, Tino?
I'm well. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, so basically, I understand that Ben's a Marxist. How are you doing, Ben?
Yeah, Ben's a Marxist.
How you do, Tino?
Well, good here. So yeah, I want to ask, what's the point of being a Marxist, or what's the goal in life?
What's the goal in being a Marxist?
Right.
So I think that what I said earlier, that the sort of ultimate political vision that would drive me is both securing all of those economic human rights that Bernie talks about, right, like a right to health care, right to a job, and also, but I don't think that's enough, because where the specifically Marxist part comes in is that I think that what we need is to democratize the economy, to have an economy where that's not dominated by businesses who are owned by people who don't work for them, and so they can just dictate to everybody who works there, every little detail of what they have to do for 8 hours of every day. But instead, we can have an economy based on workers running things from the bottom up democratically.
Shameful.
Like we can see how this works in workers' cooperatives, like the Mondragon Corporation in Spain, which is the largest employer in the Basque region of Spain, or Cooperation Jackson in this country, where you can have businesses where the people who work there can collectively, democratically decide how to run the place
by force from the government.
Well, you could have different government initiatives that could that could encourage the growth of these. Just like right now, the government does an awful lot of things to prop up existing big businesses.
Which is
like
shameful.
Walmart.
Yeah, I disagree with that stuff too. Tino, thank you, man.
I was gonna say I don't agree with that, because like people who own businesses and things like that, like you go to a job then what's the point of helping people, or employees? I know that you said that you don't like how those businesses get to dictate what their employers do. Is that right?
Oh yeah, I didn't quite make out Tito's follow-up question. Can you tell me what he said?
He said something like, "Tino, your phone's bad. I gotta go, man." He said something like, "Employers basically don't get any say in what the businesses do. Only the employees do."
Well, so if we're talking about like workers' cooperatives, we're talking about businesses that aren't owned by outside employers. We're talking about businesses that are owned by the workers themselves. And of course, from your perspective, I imagine what you might say is, "Hey, I don't have a problem with that if, like, you start a business like that, it just happens to succeed." I imagine what you would say is what you have a problem with is if I'm using, government somehow to transition to a society that mostly works this way. And that's what gets down to what I think one of the big things we've been arguing about all along, which is whether freedom is best understood as the freedom of business owners to do whatever they want in a marketplace, or whether freedom is best understood as giving ordinary people the ability to live their own lives as they choose without worrying about, like, whether their boss will like it.
All right. Let's take Louis out of Los Angeles, California. Louis, first-time caller. How are you doing, Louis?
What's up, Hake? How you doing?
Man, these phones you're like blowing them out, Joel. I'm doing all right, Louis. Hold on, sir. Hold on. Let's go for Eric out of Toronto, Canada. Try Eric. How are you, Eric?
I'm well, thank you, Hake.
Much better. Go for it.
My phone's coming through good?
Yes.
Can your guest can hear me well?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool, man. Well, thanks for coming on and, just debating and, being open with your views. I just got a couple of quick questions for you. Just give me a couple of quick answers, yeah? Would you consider yourself more a socialist or a communist?
So I think there are people whose views I agree with, who use both terms, but if by communist you mean like somebody who supports the kind of system they had in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe and everything, I don't support that, right? I support a vision based on workers' control, like what I was just talking about. So because when you say communist, most people hear the first thing, so I guess I prefer socialist.
Okay, cool. Do you have a job?
Yeah.
What do you do for a living, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind you asking at all. I'm a philosophy professor at Georgia State University, Perimeter College here in Atlanta.
Right. So you don't live in your mother's basement?
No, I don't. If you knew what my mother's basement looked like, that doesn't sound very.
You wouldn't want to live there?
But sorry, that was a joke. But I have. But no, me and my wife live in a very nice apartment here in Atlanta. No complaints
my wife
about
and
that.
Fair enough. Would you consider yourself a neckbeard?
No, I will actually show the audience here. I shave my neck every morning.
Attaboy. And what's your rank in World of Warcraft?
I've never played World of Warcraft. I have. In fact, I never really got into video games at all. I mean, every once in a while when I'm at a bar and they have like one of those old Pac-Man arcade games, I'll put a quarter in there and play it. But I really, for whatever reason, I really never got into anything more recent than that.
Right. You ever thought of going to Colombia and joining the FARC? They're Marxists, right?
These are all
bombings and all that good stuff.
These are all very intellectually curious, important questions, and I can see that you're really interested in having an open exchange of ideas. But no, I haven't. I don't know if you've ever considered going to Colombia and joining one of the right-wing.
I've been there. It's a beautiful country.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it, Eric. Take care.
You join a desk squad while you're there. Just visit.
Let's try Louis again, real fast. Louis, first-time caller from Los Angeles. How are you?
Hey,
much better.
Good.
Much better. Thank you. Go for it.
Yeah, I had a question. I saw the debate last night, and it was really boring.
Yeah.
And none of the Democrats really stood out. And I was wondering if you think that if Trump is going to win the flip states like Nevada or maybe even California.
I don't see him winning California. The people are way too brainwashed currently. But, any question for Ben?
Well, for Ben, I do have a comment.
Go for it.
My family, we came from a country where socialist policies were implemented, and
Which
they
country
didn't
is
work.
that, Lewis?
Which country?
We came from Guatemala.
So that's
And-
interesting
and-
because my understanding was that in Guatemala there was a left-wing government in the early 50s and it was overthrown by a CIA coup, and there was a right-wing dictatorship that killed an awful lot of people.
And then there was a war, the indigenous rebels, and what happened is they nationalized some of the industries, and it didn't turn out well. We actually had my grandparents were able to give my dad a decent, like, lower middle class life, and the government came in and said, it's ours, and
What
that's
time period are you
socialism.
talking about here, Lewis?
What time period was that? What decade?
When the Civil War happened.
So
The Civil War happened.
I don't know.
On paper,
I don't know.
it ended in
I don't know my
92.
history. Say that?
92.
But it actually didn't end till 2010. On paper, it ended in 92, but that's not really accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything on that, Ben Burgis?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think that I certainly wouldn't claim to be an expert on Guatemalan history and the 80s or 90s, whenever we're talking about. But like I said, I think that one problem that a lot of Latin American governments that have had, certainly famously including Guatemala in 1954, when they've tried to implement nationalizations or other policies like that, is that you end up with CIA coups and bloodthirsty right-wing dictatorships. Also, just real quick to address the question that he asked you, I'd actually say that if we get Bernie Sanders or maybe even Elizabeth Warren, then I think that it should be really interesting to see what Trump could hold on to, because he was only able to win last time by winning Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which were states that could have easily gone the other way even then. And that was when he was pretending that he wasn't going to go after anybody's benefits, that he wasn't going to touch entitlements, that he was trying to pretend to be some kind of economic populist, that he was really against the globalists and the banks and everything. And I think if you look at the way that the last few years of his actual record have been, I think that pretense is just over.
All right.
And so if somebody is running on Medicare for all and he has to run on Blue Cross Blue Shield, I think he's going to lose.
Thank you, Lewis. Take care, man.
Okay, thank you so much.
Appreciate
God bless
that. I'm going to get to some more calls, but real fast, I want to actually get to your book. Your book cover.
Let's do it.
Yeah, your book cover covers Ben Shapiro's mantra, facts don't care about your feelings. And then it has like an old, I don't know if it's a founding father or who.
That's the philosopher David Hume.
Okay, saying shh.
Yes.
Do you have, okay. Give them an argument, logic for the left. Yeah, and I noticed you target Ben Shapiro, but Ben Shapiro, kind of like you, is an intellectual, not particularly fond of Trump. That's the other Ben. So how does it feel to be an intellectual, anti-Trump intellectual, just like Ben? That's an ad hominem, right? Or something like that?
Sure. If you want to get real nerdy about it, that's the fallacy of the undistributed middle, which is like if you say that all wolves are mammals,
right,
and all cats are mammals, so all wolves are cats. But in any case, that's neither here nor there. I'd say that me and that other Ben have more not in common than we have in common, and I think especially if you look at like him and a lot of other kind of so-called never Trump Republicans, although I don't know if
he's never Trump, but anyways,
I don't know if you can call him that anymore, because I think that he's at this point.
I don't know if he ever was, to be honest. He's just kind of a hater.
Okay, so
anyways.
A lot of these Republican Trump haters, when you really dig into it, they don't disagree with Trump about as much as you'd think from how much they dislike him. Like they really, a lot of these guys, they really agree with quite a bit of what he's done in office. They agree with the policies. They just kind of find him embarrassing because he.
They're intellectuals.
Yeah, well, because they're intellectuals, they want to have a certain kind of
Decorum.
plausible deniability, and and they want to say, and you want to say like, look, I just think these policies would be better. I don't hate anybody. And then Trump is out there saying that Mexicans are rapists and we should ban
It's a
Muslims
true statement.
and grab women by the pussy and all those things that he says.
He didn't say the grab the women in the public. That was a private conversation. That was just messing around.
Sure.
That wasn't even on the campaign trail. That was like 12 years earlier, 13.
No, that's true.
But his Mexicans are rapists. That's a factual statement. Like logically, you have to admit that that's true.
Well, no, not really.
Yeah,
So,
you do. Because are you going to say that no Mexicans have committed rape coming across the border?
Yeah, well, that's a false dilemma.
No, because he said that they are, meaning like too many are. Does that make sense? You still there? Oh, he disconnected. Call him back. We may have to call him on the phone. Anyways, yeah, see if you can reconnect with him. And sorry about that, guys. Ben Burgis will be back shortly, hopefully. I wonder, I don't want to go over time with him. Anyways, call that like a moot point because you lied. Anyway, Chris out of Virginia. Chris, first time caller. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Fine, thank you. What's up?
Hey, yeah, I did 22 years in the military. So when I hear somebody wanting to change this country into a country overseas, why are they so dead set on destroying our country instead of moving into that little utopia that they love so much? But that's not my question. My question is, Sanders, who he's obviously in love with, couldn't afford $15 an hour. So the first thing he did is hours.
We have him back, I think. So Sanders couldn't afford to pay his employees $15 an hour. Hey, Ben, we ended off disagreeing about Trump calling Mexicans rapists. He said that they are, my point is, he said that basically that meant too many are. Your point is that something like probably illegals commit less crime than Americans or something like that. But let's move on because I have Chris.
Because I just heard caller repeat a lie about Sanders and his employees' wages, and this is just totally untrue. So here's what happened, and here's how the media distorted it.
Okay.
So what happened is that Sanders, a lot of his campaign staff, they're not hourly employees at all. They're making annual salaries. And the annual salaries are based on the assumption that you're working a certain number of hours a week, all this stuff. And but it turned out because the campaign schedule was so busy, a lot of these people were working way more than 40 hours a week. And so that meant that like the equivalent, right, if you divided up how much they were working by, the annual salary by how many hours a week they were working, equivalent came out to a little bit less than $15 an hour. The staff union pointed this out. There were some negotiations about it that were already well underway before the distorted version of this hit the press. And then what they agreed on is to make sure that nobody was working more than 40 hours. There was also an option that was given to the staff union to go with the higher hours, but also increase the wages. They decided they wanted the 40 hours at the same. So at the end of the whole negotiation, here's the point. At the end of the whole negotiation, nobody got moved from full-time to part-time. Nobody lost their job, and everybody's making at least the equivalent of $15 an hour. Trying to turn this into some kind of gotcha for Sanders is just deeply silly.
Yeah, I'm not into that.
That's a lie.
Really. But I liked Chris's point that he fought for America, and he doesn't like you trying to transform America, you guys.
Okay.
Anything to that?
So if we had a left-wing veteran on here, could they say, hey, I fought for America. I don't want you trying to transform America by trying to take away abortion rights, by trying to make all the changes that you guys on the right want to make.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that, man.
Hold on.
All right, real fast.
Yeah.
He's passionate.
you keep claiming that you want a better America, and then you just ran on a rant about Sanders. What you're not telling people, and that's why you kind of snuffed me, is that when they tried to form a union, they fired those two guys.
Nope, that's a lie.
Yes,
that's a lie.
No.
That's absolutely untrue. They have
This is the Bernie thing?
Unionization. It was the first campaign that was unionized, not because it was the first one that tried to be unionized, but because the Sanders campaign was supportive of the effort. When the union was formed, she was all in favor of, you had this, you had this deal where
thank you, Chris. I got to go.
Making less than $50 an hour. At the end of the negotiation, nobody lost their job.
Yeah, you know what? I don't really care about attacking the Bernie campaign, man. So let me get to some quotes from your book. Oh, look, first let me play that cartoon from Ben Garrison, because he mentions the Ben Garrison cartoon with Stefan Molyneux popping all the Trump is Hitler, not an argument. Never Trump, not an argument. Trump is a misogynist, not an argument. Trump is racist. Trump went bankrupt, not an argument. And then a muscular, lean Trump, Ben Burgis points out in his book, the intro to his book, that it's basically the premise of your book. It was kind of interesting. I read the beginning of it. Is about the right wingers tout their logic and they want to reduce everybody to a pile of junk, meaning the leftists just totally destroy them and stuff like that. It's a big ego, whatever. It's not about pursuit of truth. And you make the point. I have this quote, first quote, Joel. Right wingers turn a disturbing lack of empathy with the victims of right-wing policies into a virtue. A lack of empathy is a virtue. Empathy is a liberal word. That's funny. And then so you make that sarcastic quote, if you were less emotional, basically, you wouldn't object to human rights violations in Palestine or America's southern border. And my take to that is that liberals sympathize with fake victims and make them bring out the worst in them. For example, Palestine. Yeah. I know a guy who went to Jesse Lee Peterson went to Israel, right? And he looked at Palestine, and the people on that side were ghetto. They weren't taking care of their stuff. He compared it to the black community just not taking care of their community, versus Israel it was like the whites and the Asians. They keep their stuff, at least on the outside, looking nice and clean. Maybe inside they're kind of corrupt. But he basically said that it was it's kind of appealing to the victims. And then in the case of the people on the southern border, those are not victims, those are perpetrators. They're trying to invade the country illegally or legally by hook or by crook, taking advantage of the loopholes. The anti-American ACLU is just trying to overrun the system. I noticed that Marxists and communists, I think it's in their handbook, like to overwhelm the system so that they can destroy it and rebuild it in their image.
There's a handbook? Nobody told me there was a handbook.
I heard there was one. I don't know. So, interesting.
All right. Well, about all of that, groups that are at the bottom of the economic ladder at any given time, whoever's in poverty at any given time, racists and bigots always say, oh, look at these people. They live in disgusting ways. They don't take care of their stuff. That's the kind of thing that people said about Jews in Europe in the 1930s. And so I am disappointed but not surprised to hear Jesse say the same thing about Palestinians, or for that matter, about black people in the United States. I think that any realistic adult explanation of why there's going to be a wealth disparity between black people and white people in the United States isn't going to be something about personal morality or responsibility.
Yes, it is. Big time.
If only they were more responsible.
That's huge.
Because look, why, if you're just appealing to human nature or individual decisions, that can't explain why you have these big group disparities. The obvious explanation of the big group disparities is that the history that they have it's only been in the last few decades that the whites only signs that you think should go back to the windows came out of them.
I don't think they should go back. I think they should be free.
But you think it's okay.
Yes.
To put them there, that
right.
if that like people have, that like a business owner has a right to put them there.
Okay, let me move to the next thing, because this is kind of may go into your spiel.
Sure. Yeah,
you have this quote about college-educated urbanites. They basically just get, quote, decades of paying down student loan debt. And then you kind of indicate, but that's good because, well, I don't know. I'm putting words in your mouth there when I say that's good.
Yeah, I don't think it's good. It's very bad. I think I support Sanders' proposal to cancel that, but go on.
I think that deep down, the Marxists like this because this situation, as you say, played a role in the revival of the left.
Yeah, so...
All is well that ends well, right?
So look...
By any means necessary.
The legalization of abortion in 1973 certainly played a role in the revival of the religious right. Does that mean that people on the religious right are secretly happy that abortion was legalized?
That's a good question. I don't know. That would, that is an interesting question. I don't think it's a good thing. But I'll say, I will, because I don't remember that time. I wasn't born yet. But I do know the Obama presidency and the rise and all the LGBTQIA stuff and the Black Lives Matter riots and how nasty the media got lying about the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. That awakened President Trump, I think, because it was like a nightmare for America. So, yeah, I think there does have to be evil in the world sometimes to really awaken people. Like Trump himself awakened people, but he also brought out a lot of evil in the media and people. And that awakened people too, just seeing how nasty and evil the pro-abortion people are. Like they're bragging about abortions and stuff. And that, I think, awakened people, snapped them out of their lull, whatever, in order to kind of come back to their senses. So yeah, in a sense, evil does work for good and evil works for evil too. Make sense?
Yeah. From my perspective, I'd much rather talk about whether for something like, whether there should be abortion rights or whether student loan debt is a good thing to have or whether it would be better for society to cancel it. I'd rather argue it on the merits than speculate about like what's going on in people's hearts or call people who disagree with me evil.
Okay. No, I mean I believe. Do you believe in evil? Like evil exists?
Do I? Well, I think that certainly, severe lack of empathy that can lead people to treat each other as if they were less than human exists. I see examples of that all the time.
Okay. Let me get to more quotes. In the case of logical newbies, you refer to logical newbies who learn the fallacies, who are too eager to find fallacies, and you bring up one that I really like. Any citation of expert opinion will be classified, that's the quote 3, I think, will be classified as appeal to authority. And you also talk about ad hominem. Anything's an example of saying something mean will be classified as ad hominem. And appeal to authority is exactly what the... oh, man, we have like a minute to go, man.
Okay.
Appeal to authority is the climate argument, the climate hysteria. Man-made climate change.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what appeal to authority isn't. Appeal to authority is when the authority is irrelevant because they don't know anything that you don't. If somebody is an actual expert on climate science, that actually does give you a good reason to listen to them. I understand we're out of time. Thank you very much for having me on. I enjoyed the discussion. I hope you did too.
Me too, man. One grammar correction. Let me show this one. You said,
"Oh crap! All right, send me the grammar correction by email, and I'll let the publisher know for the second edition."
Okay, cool. Anyways, man, I appreciate talking with you. I noticed that the Marxists such as the climate so-called scientists, they like to go outside of your field of expertise, so they keep you back on your heels. But that's why I like the non-intellectualism of people like Trump and Jesse Lee Peterson, where they just completely ignore you guys on that because your solutions are false solutions anyway, regardless of what the truth really is. Like you guys want just globalist socialism. That's the answer to the climate stuff.
Well, we can certainly agree that Donald Trump and Jesse Lee Peterson, whatever might be wrong with them, it's not intellectualism.
Excellent. All right, man.
Okay.
Take care, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Ben Burgis. Bye. Take care, guys. I'm going to see you guys on the Fallen State live chat. The Fallen State is live at noon today, noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Go to thefallenstate.tv or go to the Fallen State YouTube channel. It does get automatically uploaded to the BitChute channel, the Fallen State BitChute channel. Church Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific time, which is 1 Central, 2 Eastern. And that's rebuildingtheman.com/church. Appreciate you guys. Thank you to YouTube, DLive, Mixer, Streamlabs. Support Bond. We have the matching donation. Go to rebuildingtheman.com. Scroll down. You'll see the way to join in on the matching donation via GoFundMe or some other means. Or JesseLeePeterson.com is another way to find it. JesseLeePeterson.com, rebuildingtheman.com. Information is there. All right, guys. See you Sunday on my channels, but don't forget the Fallen State. All right, guys. Take care.